My name is Samvit Kanoria. I'm a senior partner with Mckinsey. I lead our work in real estate and cities and globally in megaprojects. And maybe we'll just do a quick round of introductions and we'll get into it. We have a fun session this morning ahead. Dale?
Morning, everyone. I'm Dale Sinclair. I'm Head of Digital Innovation for WSP. We are looking at game-changing projects all over the world, so excited to be here talking to you today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amr Khambouche. I head the delivery function at Roshn, so everything related to project management, design, and delivery falls within us, and similar to what Dale was saying. We've got a lot of stuff coming up and a beautiful mandate, so we'll discuss that hopefully at some point with Samvit.
Thank you, Amr. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shahan Barhoum. I work for British Standards. I'm the Group Director for the Assurance Business in British Standards, and thank you very much for inviting us here.
Awesome. So why don't we get into it? I want to give you three numbers, 12, 50, and 98. $12 trillion is the size of the AEC, architecture, engineering, and construction industry. $12 trillion. $50 billion is the amount of capital which has gone into investing in startups that work in the space in the last 3 years. 98% is the amount of projects that are delayed or overrun by more than 20 months. So this is a big opportunity, but clearly there's a missing link. And I want to explore with my panelists today what is the missing link and how we're going to solve it together. So maybe Dale, the first question to start us off. We've talked a lot about technology in this space, in the world of Giga-Projects, in the world of urban planning. We've talked about BIM for the last 20 years. Why should we believe this now? What's new and why should we believe this now?
I think what's different now is the scale of people coming into, as you said, there's lots of prop tech companies coming into the industry now. So I think, first of all, there's huge volume of people trying to change what we do. I think the second aspect is the sheer scale of what we're trying to achieve. So I think all of these add up to make you realize that we are on the cusp of a paradigm shift. In terms of getting to the paradigm shift, I think the challenges are not technological, they're all behavioral. Because, as architects, we look, the scale drawing, which we invented 500 years ago, is still at the heart of what we do. So we're really struggling to get even. So we use these amazing 3D tools. We're using a lot of AI simulation tools, but at the end of the day, just trying to get away from the traditional way of designing and constructing is really tough because it's seeped in everything we do, and it has been for thousands of years. So and that's why every time we try and change, it's always really tough because we have a whole industry that's used to doing things a very particular way. But yes, I can definitely see that we're seeing the pilot projects, we're seeing the initial really positive waves that things are going to change this time. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Dale, I want to pick up on what you said about behavioral change. And Amir, you're in the field. And I think I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about Roshn's need for speed. And how do you do that with the context of behavioral change that is needed?
So in terms of our mandate, we're a PIF-backed company, a Giga-Project, and we've got multiple jobs going on everywhere across the kingdom. Our mandate is around circa 400,000 homes to be awarded by 2030. So one of the things is rightly said, you're talking about speed. And back to just sort of piggybacking on what Dale was saying is behavioral change. One of the things that we're doing is trying to get the young generation into the field. So rather than trying to concentrate on the veterans of the business, we get 1 or 2 or 3 veterans that can train the younger generation and see if we can get those behavioral changes addressed in essence. But surprisingly enough, those younger generation are much smarter, faster, more adaptive to all the technology that we use. Notwithstanding everyone here, but we're a bunch of dinosaurs here, unfortunately, and we look at technology as evil, like you said.
Yeah.
The younger generation, no, they'll take a look at the BIM model. So you tell them to go review something on a drawing, they actually go pick up a BIM model and say, I want to see it on a BIM model, and you go, no, give me a piece of paper.
Yeah.
He goes, oh no, it's right here.
Yeah.
In terms of speed, what we're trying to do is back to what you're saying, Samvit, is trying to integrate all these various technologies into what we're doing in terms of drawings and design and tendering it out. So the way that we tender out projects right now is through our BIM models. We actually do that. So the creation of the BIM model has to include being a large master plan communities that we mainly do, mixed use master plan communities. We actually do a fully coordinated BIM model on everything. So including the hardscape and the hardscape furniture that you actually see on the drawings, we get into that. And the reason why we do that, and we spend a bit of time in the forefront, is to make sure that it doesn't take us as much time executing the job. So as you said, 98% of the jobs are delayed. And the reason why they're delayed is this whole rush, let's get it out. And then you start tripping on the field, trying to get stuff done. And with the supply chain as well here, with all the projects coming up, everyone seems to want to say, yes, we can do it in 2 years when it actually takes 4. And we don't help sometimes as the clients in terms of saying, we want it tomorrow, rather than actually giving it the right time. So we're thankful enough with our management, our CEO, where he says, no, just give it the time that it actually needs, report the time that you actually need to do the job, rather than report it delayed later. So in terms of that, I think it's exciting times, to be honest with you, with all the new stuff that's coming up. It's going to be different, hopefully.
Amir, I wanted to, since you invoked dinosaurs, I want to spend a minute on dinosaurs. In the US alone, we learned that 40% of those that work in this industry will retire by 2030. I want to say that again. 40% of those that work in this sector will retire by 2030. So, Amir, with that recognition, what's the plan to get young people excited to work in the space? How do you train them? How do you motivate them? How do you attract them and retain them?
So one of the things that we do at Roshn is we have this HIMM program where we try to target various young individuals, fresh graduates from schools, specifically selected to be the future leaders. And they go through sort of a rotation within Roshn. They spend a time with development, they spend a bit of time with design, they spend a bit of time with the technical team, a bit of time with the project management team, delivery, and they go across the entire chain. So this is sort of similar to what I think Disney used to do, where they just started taking people left, right, and center and trying to see where best fit. And after the 2 years, that Career Start program, after the 2 years, you give them the choice of where do you want to be, where do you see yourself. On top of that, what we do as well is we try to get as many young engineers as possible into at least my department or my function to train them up. So we'll attach an engineer to sort of a dinosaur, as back to the statements that we're saying. We'll attach one to the dinosaur and just shadow him. We don't want him to do anything the first year or year and a half, but we want him to shadow that person just to learn what needs to be. And luckily enough, to be honest with you, the people that we've been hiring, they've proved to be, and I keep saying it, much smarter than us in terms of picking up all of this stuff. They're faster, they research stuff quicker, they're able to do things much quicker than we do. We're kind of meticulous, we want to do it 100% right, we want to make sure everything's okay, but these guys end up doing it in half the time, and a beautiful work comes out. Granted, it's not 100% yet, but at least for somebody that just graduated or came on board and they're doing it. So we're trying to do a lot of that just to make sure that this industry actually continues, and it's mostly concentrated on the local talent here. You can't rely on the US or the UK or the other parts of the GCC. So you're trying to get all the local talent here as much as possible, and you try to engage them. So you try to give them a bit of leeway, a bit of room to make their own decisions, make the mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them. So that's part of things that we're doing, at least at Roshn. So hopefully people will pick up on that and start doing it elsewhere on DevCos.
Thanks, Amar. We're in a session on technology, and we spent time on behavior, we spent time on people. But I want to go back to technology for a second, and maybe I'll come to you, Shahan, which says, you guys in many ways are the standards of industry standards. And with that, I wanted to kind of ask you, how do you think about standards for technologies that don't exist? And how do you think about writing that into standards for stuff that we actually don't know that we need or that doesn't even exist today?
Well, the technology that we're talking about it now, whether that is from an AI perspective or whether that is from digital twins and so on, they do exist now as we speak, but I think the standards plays a major role in this, how you can have a platform and a framework where people can use to be able to be successful in it. I was talking to one of our partners the other day about AI, and this is a new fancy word that everyone is excited about it, especially the new generation. But AI can be as biased as any human being, because AI is based on algorithms and machine learning, and those algorithms are built by a human. So that biasness of a human can absolutely move into there. I believe the role of the standards is pivotal in this, like in any other area that it was before, where you can create a platform and a framework and consensus, most importantly, amongst best practices and people that work around how you build on that one, and then leave the space on the next level behind it for innovation. Because you cannot as well limit people to say, this is how you do it, and this is the result that we expect from it. You create just the platform and framework behind it based on the consensus, and you drive the improvement where you allow that innovation to come through. At the end of the day, you need to benchmark results. So we always talk in any business, whether we like it or not, on ROIs and what's the benefit of it. Unless you have that platform, you will not be able to benchmark, because the benchmarking is very important in any industry that you work. That's how industries really excel and improve and do things. And that's where the role of the standards comes in. And BSI is not we sit down and we write standards in a room. We actually engage. In fact, Dale is one of our committee members, or the chairman of one of the committees. We engage with the industry to come up with the solutions and consensus so it can benefit the industry back.
Shyam, I want to pick up one thing which you said about some of these technologies that have existed for many years. And Dale, linking back to one of the conversations we were having in preparation. In the last 3 years, there are probably about 6,500 technology startups that are working in this space. So yes, they may be taking foundational technology and doing something innovative with them, with applications. And so maybe Dale, to yourself, what are some of the more interesting applications that you're seeing coming through? What are some of the more interesting things that are becoming, a bit more commonplace, in the world of innovation? And then maybe Amar, will come to you to say, where are you seeing this scale? Right? That would be interesting to hear as well. So maybe Dale first yourself.
Yeah, I suppose first of all, I think what we've got to realize is that there's a number of changes that are happening, and one of the first ones is we're trying to shift away from construction into manufacturing. So that's a really important change, because again, we've been constructing buildings for thousands of years. I think the second thing is a lot of the software that we use, we've been using for a long time. We've got a key relationship with likes of Autodesk. I'm speaking at the Autodesk conference in Vegas in a few weeks' time. So those software relationships are really key. But what we are seeing is those connecting bits of software. So we do some of that in-house, but we're also looking at some of these tech companies that you're talking about. How do we connect all the different bits of software? So for me, one of the exciting things is all about connecting the data. And really data, I would say, in the last 12 months, is the conversation is really powering up around data. I would say that our BIM models for 10 years have been geometrically focused, but now we're really driving the value from the data in the models and then connecting all our software to those different bits. So we'll see things get much, much faster. But I think the thing that's really important when it comes to AI is that we still design intuitively. So the really exciting thing for me is things like decision engines, because right now, I don't know how many architects are in the world, but let's say there's 1 million architects in the world. So the knowledge from those 1 million architects is in 1 million of these things. We've got 1 million brains. So there's no way AI can touch that. So we've got to somehow get that intuitive knowledge into expert systems if we're really going to get AI to come to bear. And of course, the other thing is that all that, the knowledge that we do have has been sitting in servers. And it's only in the last few years that we've made that shift to cloud. So I think by trying to download the knowledge that we have and look at expert systems, things like decision engines, I think that's when we'll start to see AI starting to kick in maybe 5 years' time. So lots of different things that are happening that are really exciting. Transition from intuition to knowledge systems, construction to manufacturing, designing for manufacturing, and so on and so forth. So it's a really exciting time because all these things are in motion at the same time. So it's a real chance for us not to optimize construction, which is in essence what we've been doing for decades. It's about a paradigm shift, and I'm absolutely convinced by the end of this decade, we will see that paradigm shift happening.
And Amir, maybe comment on this. How do we go from lab to site? Because I think what Dale is describing is there's a lot of work in this in the environment, and it's happening. There are lots of pilots. You know, the country, and Roshn specifically, has a mandate to deliver an incredibly ambitious, target for communities,
Yep.
and you've got to get that done. So how do you go from lab to site in an expedient way, taking the 6,500 kernels of ideas, which is what startups are, and doing it at scale?
So we have, as part of the team, I think Samvit and Dale, you guys work a lot with us in terms of trying to figure it out. One of the things that Dale spoke about, and Samvit, you were involved as well, is trying to take that construction into manufacturing. We're trying to get away from trying to do things the old-fashioned way, where you have 6,000 laborers on site running around, logistics nightmare, everything. We're just trying to design for modularity, in essence, in terms of be it the bathrooms, the kitchens, the standard room sizes, all of that. But in terms of the technologies, which is really interesting, there's a couple of things we do look at. So every once in a while, back to the young talent, they'll say, "Oh, I've seen this," and we actually look at it and go, "Let's pick it up." Even though, and I think myself and you, Samvit, have been discussing this, most of these companies are pretty much kids running it out of the basement somewhere in the US or out of a garage somewhere, and it's just trying to bring that idea into fruition. So there's a couple of things we're looking at in terms of integrating AI. So what we're trying to do on one of them is trying to download all our technical specs, everything, into the AI engine where anyone can come in and start searching stuff. We're trying to get that as well done through our document controlling system, where you don't need to start looking over old emails and looking through old correspondences and all that. That's back to AI. But more so with AI coming up, we're actually starting to use AI in terms of Mid-Journey or the likes of DALI or whatever it is, to start generating ideas for us to start briefing all these consultants. So in terms of looking at that, it's shortened the time scale. There's also other technologies that we're looking at, hopefully that'll speed up the initial phase of the project. So looking at it from terms of feasibility, looking at test fits, looking at making sure that the numbers actually work on the project, and we can actually run through them rather than take a 9-month period where we just sit there and do nothing. Our mandate is huge. We don't have time to waste on that. So we're trying to figure out every technology, and it's just a process that keeps going and going and going. It's not a one-time thing. You stop, you find something, and you go. It's whatever comes to the market and it clicks. We'll try to bring them in, and be it in the US or in the UK or even in Asia, we'll bring the people in, we'll talk to them, and try to figure out how to upscale them and see if we can, as Roshn, be part of that company. So in terms of that, we're hoping at some point in time one of them becomes a unicorn, like you said, but we'll see.
I mean, I love what you said, which is innovation at scale driven by young people,
Yes.
right? Which is, I think, the essence of what you said, and I find that kind of fascinating. And as we speak about young people, I think it's impossible to talk about the world of construction without recognizing the environmental impact of this and what young people care about. And Sharma, I'm going to come to you in a second about this on sustainability. We all know the stats. 38% of greenhouse gas emissions is attributed to the built environment and the construction industry. 25% of air quality PM 2.5 scores is attributed to this industry. So this is, in many ways, the culprit. So what should we do about it?
So as you mentioned, built environment is the largest contributor to the carbon emission in the world. Sustainability is an element where you need to look at the whole supply chain. You cannot just take things for you to take things in context, you need to look at the whole supply chain and the providers. Construction will always require concrete, will always have the steel, will always have the shipment, will always have the movement. Having just one solution where you sometimes hear people saying hydrogen is going to be the solution. Well, how are you going to transfer hydrogen? Green steel will be the solution. How are you going to ship the green steel? I don't think we will ever reach a point, I might be in at least in the coming 10 years, that it will be carbon neutral or carbon zero. But definitely the sustainability element within the supply chain is as important as the implementation and the working on site. Because if you don't take this into consideration, all of what you do from scope 1 and scope 2 will be okay-ish, but scope 3, and now they're talking about scope 4, will not be. So you're just transferring that problem of sustainability from a place to another. You're not fixing that problem. And again, not only just standards, but standards, regulations, and best practices around the world can play a vital element into this. How you really move products from a place to another, how you choose your supplier. I was listening to one of the sessions yesterday. Companies start to look at their suppliers where they are closer to them. So instead of you have less of an impact on the environment while driving, while moving things around. This is an important element when you look at how the future will look like. If the future will look like that in this region we are fine and we're looking at sustainability and we're taking it seriously, but other region is not taking it seriously, guess what? We live in the same environment and we live in the same world. And that needs really to be discussed. My approach in that one in a collaborative way. You can't do things in isolations without really collaborating and working with others on the industry. Again, let's not fool ourselves. It will not be zero in the coming 10 years. But still sustainability a big impactful in this one. And that's where innovation comes from. How you can innovate in sustainable material, in green material, in the energy that you use. And that's where the industry needs to play a vital role in this discussion.
Dale, maybe let's talk a little bit about this further, right, on sustainability. And I think Shami referenced this notion of, we talked about design for manufacturing, and now how do we design for sustainability? Yeah. And so you guys in many ways have been at the cutting edge of this. So talk us through that process. How do you think about designing for sustainability? And maybe even the golden question, are people willing to pay for this? Is someone willing to pay a premium for sustainability? And how are you thinking of that as you think about design?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things there. I suppose the key driver in the last couple of years has been embodied carbon and trying to drive. So we've been focused on operational carbon for a long time. Yes. So I think we're on top of that. The key thing now is trying to look at materials and embodied carbon. But I think the big piece of that is the carbon that comes from transportation. And so I think as part of new manufacturing models, I think we will see some gigafactories, but what excites me is things like microfactories being networked. So the AMRC in the UK did a project, Factory 2050, which was about networking microfactories. So again, using data to do that. And I like the idea of almost driving social value propositions as well. So you put the factories into the community. So then, because what you've got to remember is if we take construction workers away from site, we can place them anywhere we want. So we can drive whole new propositions around social value. We can put them close to the workers. So we can use, and of course we can use data to drive all these models. So I think that the carbon thing will be around how those manufacturing models work. Where's the best place to put the factories? Can we get rail to work? No, because we know that in demand there's a link from sea to rail, but not necessarily in Jeddah. So there's all these transportation and logistic elements that can start to decarbonize that whole part of the journey. So the new materials is huge, but I think that what excites me is looking at these new manufacturing models and where do the factories want to be to drive out carbon.
Awesome. We're a small group, so I'm going to open it up for questions in a second. And maybe for me, the three biggest takeaways that I took away from this conversation was now it's possible. There's a lot of foundational technologies which have been in place. We've tried a lot of things already. There's a whole bunch of investment that's going into startups that are working in this space. And through AI, which is a very overused term, but essentially using what you said, which has been in data centers now in the cloud, now is possible. Right? I think I leave with that message. I also leave with where we started, which is behavior change is the hardest thing in an ecosystem like AEC, which is a $12 trillion industry. But all of that comes down to kind of behavior and behavioral changes. But I think what all of you talked about was the centrality of youth in driving this, whether it's on the corporate side through innovations in startups, whether it's about the people that Amir and Roshn employ, and whether it's the optimism which they bring as they get employed in the sector as we go forward. So I think for me, those were the three: now, behavior, and youth would be, I think, things that you guys gave us in the room to ponder with. And with that, I thought I'll open it up for questions, and we can actually have a dialogue, given we're a small group today. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think just one thing that I wanted to get your take on, which is, the context from my side is, I run a construction technology company for 7 years. It's AI focused. It's an on-site data solution, providing reliable data analytics for sites. And I completely agree with you on that. Behavior is important. Technology is improving, etc. But what we've seen, and we are on large-scale construction projects in the UK, US, and now here in the Middle East, one consistent theme is that behavior is predominantly driven not by people being. Thank you. I tried to be loud enough, but thanks. What we see is that behavior is not primarily driven by people not wanting to innovate, but by the contractual structures in construction, right? Mm-hmm. And that fundamentally, the way that projects are set up, right? And we are providing reliable, consistent data across all of these different projects. But fundamentally, most of these stakeholders actually have counter incentives not to use it, right? And they have incentives to obfuscate information, to provide wrong information. So it's not like that the people, want to do, wrong things, right? It's that the contractual structures actually almost always in construction kind of require you to do what is worse for the project, right? Which really is not great, right? So I just wanted to understand from you how you think about that and how to improve on that front, as I do think you can't change behavior without changing the contractual structure.
I have no idea what you're talking about. This seems completely Latin to me. Just kidding. Did you want to go? And then maybe Amir, because you mentioned this earlier in your opening remarks on how you're using BIM as contracts.
Yeah, so I've spoken about the shift from construction to manufacturing. The second shift that we haven't touched on yet is the shift away from the single project to, let's call it platforms or multiple project procurement. So I think the roadmap to what you're talking about and when we will start to see a real change in procurement processes is when we really get on top of how do we do multi-project procurement where we're using kits of parts and libraries of components where the supply chain agreements are completely different. We're not seeing anywhere in the world that really is. We're dipping our toes. We're optimizing traditional from a procurement perspective. But I think we're not that far away. I'm not sure what Amir's thought is, but I don't think we're that far away from having some of these new procurement mechanisms that will drive exactly the sort of things that you're talking about. So I think I feel very optimistic that what you've been struggling with is, because I say this to my team all the time, you've got to play the long game in this technology world because things never happen as fast as you like, but we will get there, and I think the sort of things that you're talking about in the next 2 or 3 years' time, we will see changes to procurement.
So I think in terms of what you were discussing, in terms of the contracts, especially with what's going on in Saudi right now and the rest of the GCC with the explosion of work that's going on, trying to rely on the old client and consultant and contractor model is not going to work. If you're planning to do something, you're planning to get a partner, and this is the word that we're trying to use as much as possible with our teams is, be it the supply chains, they're partners. They're not an outside entity where you just throw as much risk as you can within your contracts, package it all up and just throw it against that guy, and you're just throwing that risk down the supply chain. It needs to stop. And if people start thinking about how you contract with the various entities that you're contracting with in terms of a partnership model, then you'll see that go away. So people will become more open, everything's on the table, let's have the discussion, let's have this. So I think with Saudi, I think that's starting to change, specifically with Roshn. The way that we're doing all the contractual elements is we're trying to balance the risk as much as possible. So we don't want to throw the risk onto the supply chain as much as possible. But at the end of the day, you have to understand that as a client, sometimes you got to mitigate that risk and you can't keep it open. So you try to come to a sort of an agreement with your supply chain that you're partnering with, trying to make them understand that their success is going to be our success eventually, and balancing the contract as much as possible. So I think the old methodology and what you're discussing is the blood red on the FIDIC contracts that we currently use with 600 different pages of, you've got the FIDIC that's probably 9-10 pages, and then you got your amendments that's about 120 pages, it just gets attached to that throws everything out of whack. I think we're getting away from it. I think people are understanding it. And I think the supply chain is also getting smarter. They're going, come on, we've been in this game long enough. It's time to, I think, just work together and try to move this and deliver forward. So I think part of that will change. Back to, I'll echo what Dale's saying, part of it will change, and you'll see changes within the next probably year, 2 years, 3 years. It'll start to go away slowly. But we're seeing it right now in terms of people coming back and say, guys, do you want to work on this together, or do you want to go back to the old model? And that opens up the conversation to start something like that. So in terms of integrating the technologies that you guys have, we're trying to do it in a couple of sites. But yes, the first hurdle that we had with that stuff is trying to get the guy to go in and walk around the rooms and make sure that he's actually filming something, not looking the other way. So hopefully we'll get there, and I think we are getting there.
Thank you. Any question?
Yeah. Thank you for this wonderful session. I'd just like to add on to what we have been discussing. I mean, in terms of the application of AI and technology in the construction or the globalization of mega projects. You know, one of the concerns, as especially with someone like me who's been a contractor and went to a consultant to an owner, and now I'm back as a contractor, as a running my own company. One of the key areas we face is the legal side in terms of claims and mitigation and all that. And you find that across the country, from project to project, you know, and then from country to country, it's totally different. There's no standardization, right? It all depends on an individual. It's very subjective. So if you were to apply in the lessons learned or best practices as an AI application, where you're pretty much clear that, okay, if these are the parameters, this is what is the outcome, right? So you don't go into this sort of extensive process of litigation, or, you know, this sort of creating issues between the client or contractor and the subcontractor. So everybody's clear on what's going to happen. So sort of standardization of these things. So do you think that could be a possibility?
How do you standardize that? Because every job, it's its own little universe, and each one has its own rules. Each one has its own timelines, and each one has its own certain tweaks to it and particulars and the variables. So if you have the variables being all the same across the entire set of projects from east to west, then you can do something like that. Yes, I agree with you 100%. But if all these variables change on every single job, because for example, you might go for a design, bid, build job, where you design everything and go. There might be some elements of that bid job that's going to be a design and build element of it. So that's a tweak in the variable. So how many formulas are you going to try to make to get to that outcome? It'll be difficult. But what it helps out with, and rather than trying to put these formulas in to get a specific outcome, is if everything is actually open, where you actually see what the chronological status of events were, and it's just clear for everyone going, yep, this is what happened, this is where we are, this is where we need to be, and it becomes open. So I think it's back to piggybacking on that. As long as there's an open discussion, as long as you're discussing these projects as partners, then I think all of that as well will fall away in terms of, but if you go into a job thinking that we're going to have a claim or arbitration, or we're going to go to court eventually, then you might as well just throw the job out the window from the get-go. So if you approach it with a partnership model in place, I think that all that goes away. And part of one thing that we do, at least with my teams, is try to close all those open stuff as early as possible, because at the end of the day, your supply chain needs to know where he stands. He doesn't want to wait until day 300 out of 300 of the job to figure out whether he's going to get additional money, or he's going to be pretty much told, no, you're not getting anything, you're going to go away, because he's working in good faith. So you got to keep that trust going. So if that happens and you have all these variables across all these jobs fixed, then happy days for all of us, I guess. Then you don't need us here.
I just hope that every contractor thinks like you. So that will save a lot of issues. I mean, just the key areas like, timeline, scope,
yep.
On a broader level, so that I understand the complexities of each project, but each as there are similarity in each project. So at that level, yeah. Thank you for that.
Shyam, did you want to add anything to that?
I mean, one of the points that I think regulators and standard bodies, including ourselves, need to shape up as well. Agility is important of what's going on in the world. We hear every time that people talking about why the project that we talked about it last month, why it's not delivered yesterday. That wasn't there 20 years ago. And I think that element as well, where the industry needs to feed back to national standard bodies and regulators of the importance of agility, where you can create similarity wherever possible, and in a smart way. We were talking, me and Dale, about it just earlier. There's a big push now around the world to talk about smart standards, where you can only take pieces of the standards where it fits the focus, and you can use it in your project, or you can use it in your contract. And that's based on the industry feedback. Again, in a Giga project, for you to move that Giga project from a place to another, you need that framework. But as well, Amr said, there's no one framework fits for everything, but there's a foundation that fits for everything. And one important thing we in this, and part of this discussion, when we talk about AI, I always tell my colleague, and I always tell everyone within the standards team, let's not misunderstand this. AI is not a solution. AI is a fancy tool that can help you to achieve the agility that you would like to achieve using smart standards, smart regulations, and agreement and frameworks.
Should we move on to the next one? Yeah. Any other questions? Do you want to?
Yeah. So, I mean, to answer the question, I need to go back 150 years, because 150 years ago, we invented the Bessemer process, which allowed steel to scale. Otis invented the lift. We invented drywall. We invented toilet systems. Before, toilets used to be in our garden because we didn't have cisterns and so on. So we did a lot of work around systems. And that whole layer of innovation at the end of the 19th century resulted in New York, because that's on the back of that New York was built. Now, actually, when you think about it, the Empire State Building was probably built faster than most commercial buildings still are in most of the cities in the world. So arguably, we haven't moved on, right? So that's my marker in the sand. What we're seeing now is that shift. So, and to me, that was probably the last paradigm shift. Go back to this whole notion of a paradigm shift. I think what we're starting to see with some of the projects we're doing is bigger sub-assemblies. We're making things much bigger. So for 100 years, we've made lots of small things, taps, baths, flooring, and we take all these small things to this one place, the site, where we construct them. We are seeing this shift to manufacturing, where much bigger things get made. And back to the point about standards, where we start to standardize, and then we can have those components made in that are reusable by different clients. So I think this shift to manufacturing will result in a whole new generation of innovation and construction products. That's why it's too early for AI, because we haven't actually invented the product. So I think we've got to realize that it's not just AI that's going to be important, is we need another couple of decades of invention and innovation to bring this whole new catalogue of manufactured elements, which are much, much bigger. We've got a project in the UK with Mace just now, where we've taken 5,000 construction products and we've turned that into 60 sub-assemblies. So we take construction from 6 months to a week, basically, on site. So those are the things that are happening. But again, that's not going to happen overnight. But it's a really exciting time, as I'm sure it was when the Empire State Building was built.
But speaking of New York in scale, right, we are building a New York every month in the world today.
Yep.
So the pace of innovation is just dramatically at a different scale, enabling all of us to do this, which is, I think, where we started our conversation. Well, if there's no more questions, I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists and to an audience, and look forward to more innovation at scale in the world of projects and actually touching the lives of people. That's why we're all here. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.